The Galactic Council chamber hummed with quiet conversation, the air thick with curiosity and unease as representatives from dozens of species gathered. Towering crystalline pillars refracted soft blue light across the vast hall, casting shifting shadows over the assembled diplomats. At the chamber's center, High Archivist Velix stood before a massive holographic display, his silver skin gleaming under the artificial glow. With a flick of his elongated fingers, symbols flickered into existence, a twisting, jagged script that none had seen in millennia. The murmurs grew louder. "This," Velix announced, his voice smooth yet commanding, "is what we have recovered from Earth's encrypted war records." A wave of confusion passed over the chamber. The Kalari Chancellor, a translucent bioluminescent being, leaned forward, her gaze piercing. "This script," she mused, her soft glow pulsing in time with her thoughts. "It resembles the lost language of the Zeldar Dominion." A ripple of unease spread through the room. The Zeldar, a name spoken only in historical texts and whispered warnings, had been a warlike race, an empire so ruthless that it had taken a united galactic effort to bring about their extinction millennia ago. Yet here, in the heart of the Galactic Council, the long-dead language shone brightly, woven into Earth's most secretive war logs. A deep, guttural laugh echoed from the far side of the chamber. Councillor Drekvor, a towering, armor-plated representative of the warlike Tarkin species, crossed his heavy arms. "Surely this is some human joke," he rumbled. "A primitive species playing with relics they do not understand." His words dripped with skepticism, but Velix did not react. Instead, he gestured toward the data. "Our intelligence teams have confirmed that this language is not just referenced in their records, it is their primary encrypted code for military operations." That revelation silenced even the most dismissive of the delegates. Ambassador Selen of the Nvari, a species known for their vast intelligence networks, narrowed her dark, avian eyes. "Have the humans responded to our inquiries about this?" she asked, her voice carrying a quiet edge. Velix exhaled slowly. "They have refused to clarify." A heavy pause settled over the chamber. The humans, ever pragmatic, ever cautious, had chosen silence. And silence, in matters of war, was often more telling than words. The Kalari Chancellor spoke again, her voice softer but no less urgent. "Why would they use this language? The Zeldar are gone. Their empire is dust." Her luminous tendrils pulsed, a sign of deep thought. "Unless—" she did not finish the sentence, but the implication was clear. "Unless they weren't gone at all." A new figure stepped forward, clad in the deep blue robes of the Galactic Strategic Division. Strategist Hartak, a reptilian being with golden eyes that gleamed with sharp intellect, let his claws tap lightly against the surface of the floating hologram. "Earth hides something," he said slowly, deliberately. "We have always suspected their secrecy ran deeper than they admitted. This confirms it. They are either fools playing with knowledge they do not comprehend," he turned, his golden eyes sweeping over the silent assembly, "or they know something we do not." The tension in the room thickened, a near-tangible force pressing against every being present. If the latter was true, if humanity had discovered something about the Zeldar, something the rest of the galaxy had overlooked, then the balance of power was not what they had believed. The Galactic Council had always viewed Earth as an emerging force, unpredictable yet relatively young in the grand scheme of interstellar politics. But now, staring at the ghostly echoes of a dead language, at encrypted words wrapped in the remains of an empire once thought vanquished, they were no longer so sure. Drekvor shifted, his heavy exoskeleton plates grinding softly. "This is speculation," he grunted. "If Earth was foolish enough to dig up old demons, let them reap the consequences." His confidence was forced, a thin veil over growing doubt. Ambassador Selen, however, was not so quick to dismiss the matter. She turned back to Velix, her keen gaze unyielding. "You intercepted these logs. Can you decipher them?" Velix hesitated. "Our teams are working on it. The structure is complex, and there are alterations to the original language, modifications that suggest adaptation, evolution. This is not just a dead tongue copied from ancient records." His silver fingers moved through the hologram, enlarging portions of text. "It is alive." A chilling silence settled over the chamber. The words were simple, but their meaning was profound. If Earth's war logs used a dead alien tongue, one belonging to the most feared civilization in galactic history, and if that language had evolved, Then humanity had not merely uncovered remnants of the Zeldar. They had spoken to them. Or worse, fought them. The Kalari Chancellor's glow dimmed, a reaction of deep unease. "We need to know the truth," she whispered, "before it is too late." The Galactic Council's secure communication chamber was dimly lit, the only illumination coming from the massive holographic projection of Earth's representative, Ambassador Elias Rourke. He stood tall in his crisp navy blue uniform, the insignia of the United Human Nations glinting under the soft light. His expression was unreadable, a perfect mask of diplomatic restraint, though the subtle flicker in his sharp eyes hinted that he knew exactly why he was here. Seated before him, arranged in a vast semicircle, were some of the most powerful beings in the galaxy. Chancellors, warlords, strategists, and intelligence officers, all waiting for answers. Kalari Chancellor Velora, her translucent tendrils shifting with an anxious glow, leaned forward. "Ambassador Rourke, we have requested clarification regarding your military records." Her voice was measured but carried an edge of urgency. "Why does Earth encode its war logs in the language of the Zeldar Dominion?" A ripple of murmurs swept through the chamber, but Rourke did not react. He clasped his hands behind his back, taking a moment before answering. "That information," he said evenly, "is classified." A guttural snarl erupted from the Tarkin representative, Drekvor, his thick, plated arms slamming onto the table. "You cannot expect us to accept that, human," he bellowed. "The Zeldar were eradicated millennia ago. If you have unearthed something, if you have been hiding something, we will have the truth." Rourke's expression remained calm, unshaken by the towering warrior's rage. "We are not obligated to disclose internal security matters to the Council," he said smoothly. "But I understand why you are concerned." Strategist Hardhack, the reptilian tactician, narrowed his golden eyes, tapping his claws lightly against the table. "Then let me put it simply, Ambassador," he said in a low, calculating tone. "Are the Zeldar alive?" The room went silent. It was the question no one had dared voice outright, yet it was the one that had been pressing against the minds of every being present. The Zeldar were not just a long-extinct race. They were legends of terror, conquerors whose brutality had united the galaxy against them. If even a fragment of them remained, the implications would be catastrophic. Rourke exhaled slowly, his posture as unshakable as ever. "The Zeldar Dominion," he said carefully, "was defeated. That is a fact. It was not an answer. And the Council knew it." Velora's glow darkened, her voice barely above a whisper. "But not all of them." Another pause, thick and suffocating. Then, finally, Rourke broke the silence. "Not all of them." The chamber erupted into chaos. Voices overlapped in a storm of confusion and anger. Some demanded explanations, others accused Earth of reckless secrecy. The revelation that the Zeldar had survived in some capacity, however small, was enough to shake the foundation of everything the Council believed. Rourke, however, remained still, his gaze sweeping over the gathered leaders with quiet control. "Before you panic," he said, raising a hand, his voice firm but not unkind, "understand this. Humanity has known about the remnants of the Zeldar for centuries." That only made the uproar worse. Selen of the Nvari, always sharp, always poised, cut through the noise with a chilling question. "If you have known," she said, her voice deadly calm, "why have you kept it from us?" Rourke turned his attention to her, and for the first time, his expression hardened. "Because we dealt with it." The words carried a weight that silenced the room. "Dealt with it." Past tense. Drekvor let out a low growl, skeptical. "Explain." Rourke's eyes glinted in the dim light. "Humanity learned of a surviving Zeldar faction nearly 300 years ago," he said. "A remnant fleet. They had been in hiding, scattered, weak by their former standards, but still dangerous. We intercepted their transmissions. We studied their tactics. We broke their code. And then—" his gaze swept across the chamber, locking onto each leader in turn. "We erased them." The chamber sat in stunned silence. It was Velora who spoke first, her voice barely above a whisper. "Alone. Without telling us." Rourke nodded. "Alone." Hardhack's claws tightened against the table. "Why?" The human ambassador's voice was quiet, but it carried across the hall with absolute clarity. "Because we remember what the Zeldar did. A new kind of silence fell, heavier than before. The rest of the galaxy had fought the Zeldar in an alliance. The war had been shared. But Earth had been different. Earth had not been a dominant player back then, had not been part of the great interstellar civilizations. But they had suffered. The Zeldar had not seen them as equals in war. They had seen them as prey. Velora exhaled, her bioluminescence flickering. "You wiped them out," she murmured. Rourke met her gaze without flinching. "Every last one." Selen's expression was unreadable, but her dark eyes gleamed with the realization of something deeper. "And the language," she pressed. "Why do you still use it?" Rourke's lips pressed into a thin line. "Because the best way to ensure they never return," he said, "is to remember them better than anyone else." Another silence, different this time. Hartak leaned forward, his golden eyes sharp. "You learned from them." Rourke nodded. "We studied them. Their strategies, their encryption methods, their psychological warfare. We turned their greatest weapons against them. And now, their language lives on, not as a threat, but as a reminder. We use it to encode our war logs so that no one else will ever wield their knowledge against us." Drekvor exhaled sharply, shaking his head in something between admiration and horror. "Humans," he muttered. "You take the ghosts of your enemies and make them your armor." Rourke allowed himself the faintest of smiles. "We do what we must." Another long pause. And then, finally, Velora spoke. "The Council will deliberate on this." Rourke dipped his head slightly. "Of course." As his hologram flickered away, the gathered leaders remained in silence, each grappling with the knowledge that Earth had not only survived the Zeldar but had consumed their legacy, turning the horrors of the past into a weapon for the future. And worse still, no one knew what else humanity had chosen to remember. The council chamber remained eerily silent, the weight of Earth's revelation pressing down on every being present. The flickering holographic display still hovered in the air, showing old war records now decoded for the first time by anyone outside of humanity. It was a chilling sight, rows upon rows of tactical logs, prisoner interrogations, encrypted strategies, all recorded in the dead tongue of the Zeldar. The language of a species that should no longer exist, repurposed as the foundation of Earth's military intelligence. For centuries, the rest of the galaxy had believed the Zeldar to be nothing more than a cautionary tale, an ancient nightmare locked away in history. And yet, here was proof that humanity had not only remembered them but had made their knowledge part of their very essence. Strategist Hartak, his golden eyes unreadable, finally broke the silence. "How much," he asked, his voice slow and deliberate, "of your modern warfare is built upon what you learned from them?" Admiral Evelyn Carter, standing in the holographic projection before them, clasped her hands behind her back. "A great deal," she admitted, unshaken. Zeldar strategies were unparalleled in their efficiency. Their ability to wage psychological warfare, to strike fear into their enemies before the first shot was fired, to control entire battlefields with nothing but deception and precision, that knowledge was too valuable to be forgotten. Kalari Chancellor Velora's bioluminescence dimmed to a deep shade of unease. "You have modeled your fleets after theirs." Carter's gaze remained steady. "No," she corrected. "We made them better." The room erupted into noise. Accusations, disbelief, shock. No one had imagined that humanity's mastery of warfare had such origins. The idea that Earth's war strategies had been directly influenced by the most feared empire in history was almost unthinkable. And yet, the proof was undeniable. Selen of the Nvari, her tone sharp as the blade-like structures along her arms, gestured toward the floating display. "You have turned their dead language into your war language. That is not the act of a species that merely remembers an enemy." Carter exhaled slowly. "We did what was necessary." Drekvor let out a guttural growl. "Necessary," he spat. "You have been hiding this from us for centuries. You have built an empire of shadows while we remained blind." Carter tilted her head slightly, her expression unreadable. "Blind," she repeated. "Or complacent." That single word sent another ripple of discomfort through the room. The rest of the galaxy had moved on, believing themselves safe. They had convinced themselves that the Zeldar were a relic of the past, that such horrors could never return. But humanity had never had that luxury. They had been one of the Zelthar's last victims before the Great War had finally wiped the Dominion out. And unlike the rest of the galaxy, they had chosen to never forget. Velora's voice was quieter this time, but still firm. "You have been waiting." Carter did not confirm or deny it. Instead, she gestured toward the holographic display. "We encoded our war logs in the Zelthar tongue because no other species still understands it. It ensures that if our transmissions are intercepted, only we will be able to decipher them. Their encryption methods were decades ahead of their time. We took what they created and refined it. We use their own tools to guard against anything that might rise in their place." Hardhack's claws drummed against the table. "And yet, if you did not believe there was still a threat," he mused, "you would not have needed to go to such lengths." Carter's gaze flickered toward him, and for the first time, there was something colder in her expression. "That's the difference between humanity and the rest of the Council," she said. "We do not assume peace is permanent. We do not assume extinction is absolute." Selen's voice was barely above a whisper. "You believe something else is coming." Carter did not answer immediately. Instead, she turned, gesturing toward another section of the holographic display. With a simple command, new data flickered into existence: transmission logs, coded messages, intercepted signals. The language was fragmented, distorted by the vastness of space and time. But even in its broken form, one thing was clear. It was Zelthar. Gasps rippled through the chamber. Even those who had suspected it had not wanted to believe. Drekvor rose to his feet, his massive form tense with barely restrained fury. "Impossible," he snarled. "The Zelthar were annihilated. You said it yourself." Carter's voice was quiet, but unwavering. "We said we erased the remnants we found," she corrected. "We never said we found all of them." The room fell into stunned silence. Hardhack exhaled slowly, his eyes sharp with understanding. "And so you have spent centuries preparing." Carter nodded. "We have been intercepting transmissions for over 100 years. They are weak, scattered, but they are out there. And they are watching." Velora's glow fluctuated in patterns of deep concern. "Why have you waited until now to tell us?" Carter's gaze swept over them, as if measuring whether they were ready for the truth. "Because you weren't ready to hear it." Selen frowned, processing the implications. "And now?" For the first time since the discussion began, Carter's expression changed. A flicker of something darker. Not fear, but certainty. "Now," she said simply, "they've stopped hiding." The weight of her words settled over the Council like a shroud. The Zelthar had been a nightmare they had all believed ended long ago. But Earth had known better. Earth had never let their guard down. And now, the rest of the galaxy was beginning to understand why. As the last of the intercepted transmissions played, the counselors could no longer deny the truth. The whispers of a dead empire were growing louder. And for the first time in centuries, the galaxy truly understood the cost of forgetting. Humanity had not remembered the Zelthar out of reverence. They had remembered them out of necessity. Because some ghosts were not meant to fade. The council chamber was no longer a place of debate, but of grim realization. The air was thick with the weight of understanding, and for the first time in centuries, the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in complete silence. Before them, the intercepted transmissions continued to play, fragments of a dead language that should have never been spoken again. The Zelthar were alive. Not only alive, but organizing. The knowledge sat heavy in their chests, suffocating. Admiral Evelyn Carter stood unwavering, her gaze sharp as steel as she allowed the weight of the revelation to settle. Across from her, strategist Hardhack had not moved since the final message had played. His golden reptilian eyes, once filled with skepticism, now reflected something deeper. Recognition. Fear. "This transmission," he finally spoke, voice measured but carrying an unshakable edge. "It is not a distress call." Carter nodded. "No," she confirmed. "It's a rallying cry." The meaning of her words settled into the room like a thunderclap. The Zelthar were not remnants, hiding in the void, clinging to the scraps of a fallen empire. They were regrouping, gathering, preparing. Drekvor, his massive war-scarred frame tense with restrained fury, leaned forward. "Why?" he growled. Was this not shared sooner? Carter met his glare without flinching. Because you would have dismissed it, she said plainly. Until today, none of you have had reason to believe the Zeldar were anything more than a ghost story. If we had come forward with only whispers and fragments, you would have ignored us. The Kalari High Chancellor Velora's bioluminescence pulsed in slow waves, signaling deep contemplation. How long? She asked, voice quieter than usual. How long have you known? Carter exhaled slowly, as if deciding how much to say. The first signal was intercepted 112 years ago, she admitted. Weak. Incomplete. At first, we thought it was just an echo, a lost fragment of the past drifting through space. But then, others followed. A pattern began to emerge. Over the last 3 decades, the messages have increased in both frequency and complexity. 2 years ago, they changed entirely. Hardhack's clawed fingers tapped against the table. Changed how? Carter turned to the holographic display, inputting a new sequence. A fresh transmission appeared, a single phrase, repeated in the unmistakable Zeldar tongue. The translation flickered beneath it. We are coming. A chill ran through the room. Selen, the sharp-edged Nvari tactician, broke the silence. You've already begun mobilizing. It was not a question. Carter nodded. The moment we confirmed intent, we knew we had no time to waste. Drekvor's mandibles clicked in frustration. And yet, you did not inform the Council. Carter's expression darkened. Do you think your people would have listened? She countered. How many times have we sat in this very chamber, warning of dangers beyond the edge of mapped space, only to be dismissed? How many times have we heard, there is no war, there is no threat? The rest of the Council has lived in peace for too long. You've grown complacent. Meanwhile, Earth has been preparing for this war since the moment we saw those first signals. The weight of her words settled upon them all. The truth was undeniable. Humanity had never stopped preparing for war, and now they were the only ones ready for what was coming. Velora's glow fluctuated in patterns of unease. Then tell us, she said. What does Earth plan to do? Carter turned back toward them, her stance firm. We're going to find them, she said. Before they find us. The boldness of the statement caused a ripple of shock through the Council. The very idea of launching a preemptive strike against an enemy as ruthless as the Zeldar was near unthinkable. Selen narrowed her eyes. You mean to go hunting for them, she said, voice tinged with both admiration and concern. Carter's lips twitched into the barest hint of a smirk. That's exactly what I mean. Hardhack steepled his clawed fingers. You would have us believe, he said slowly, that after centuries of hiding, they will allow themselves to be found? Carter's expression remained unreadable. We don't need to find all of them, she said. We just need to make enough noise to draw them out. A silence followed. A charged, unspoken understanding passed between them. Drekvor let out a sharp exhale. You intend to bait the most dangerous species the galaxy has ever known. Carter nodded once. Yes. Velora's glow pulsed erratically, uncertainty rippling through her. This is madness, she murmured. Carter tilted her head. No, she corrected. This is survival. Another silence. And then, something shifted. The weight of history settled over the room, and one by one, the counselors began to grasp the inevitable truth. The war was not coming. It had already begun. The only question left was whether they would face it on their terms, or the Zeldar's. Selen straightened. If Earth is willing to make the first move, she said carefully, then the Council must decide whether to stand with you. Hardhack's golden eyes gleamed. Or whether we repeat history and allow ourselves to be slaughtered. The chamber filled with murmurs, each leader realizing the enormity of the decision before them. To stand with Earth meant abandoning the illusion of peace. It meant preparing for a war most had convinced themselves would never come. But the alternative was extinction. Carter gave them a moment before delivering her final words. Earth remembers, she said. We have never forgotten. And now, neither will you. The meeting adjourned with no formal vote, no binding declaration. But the message was clear. For the first time in centuries, the galactic leaders had been forced to confront the truth. the shadows of the past had returned, and they had two choices: fight or perish. As Carter's holographic image faded, the weight of Earth's warning remained. The dead language of a long-extinct species had been given voice once more. And this time, the galaxy was listening.